All right, so today we're going deep on something you might not expect. The connection between textiles and trauma.
Interesting.
Yeah, we're looking at a couple of academic articles from Textile and Culture.
Yeah.
One looks at how textiles are used globally with trauma, and the other focuses on embroidery and apartheid in South Africa.
Wow.
And the big idea here is that textiles aren't just like objects.
Right. Right.
They can be a big part of both healing from and revealing trauma.
Yeah, it is fascinating how we often think of textiles as just functional or decorative.
Yeah.
But they can connect so deeply to our emotions, especially when we're processing these really tough experiences like trauma.
For sure. And the first article by Odabasi really dives into how making textiles can be like therapeutic.
Right.
They talk about things like weaving and knitting being used to help communities and people who have experienced trauma cope and heal.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think it is about working with fabric that makes it so powerful for healing?
Well, there's a certain rhythm to the repetitive motions, and that tactile experience of working with your hands.
Right.
The Odabasi article mentions how this can be incredibly grounding and calming, especially for people who are struggling with anxiety or PTSD.
Makes sense.
It's almost meditative.
Yeah, it's like instead of having to find the words to explain what you're going through,
Right.
you can just sort of pour those feelings into making something tangible.
Exactly. And the article even talks about this one case where a group of women who had experienced domestic violence found a lot of comfort in quilting together.
Wow.
Like each stitch, each piece of fabric, it became a symbol of their resilience.
Like, I think this is powerful, like literally stitching their lives back together.
Yeah.
But the article also talks about the flip side,
Yeah.
how clothing can actually trigger trauma for people.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I remember reading about this woman whose wedding dress brought back all these painful memories.
Right, and that shows just how deeply personal our relationship with clothes can be.
Absolutely.
And it goes beyond just our own associations,
Okay.
There's this concept of embodied memory, the idea that our bodies physically store memories.
Okay.
And sometimes a certain garment can trigger those memories just because of how it felt against our skin,
Interesting.
even if we don't consciously remember the event itself.
So it's not just in our minds.
Right.
It's like our clothes become part of the memory.
Exactly.
Wow.
Now, moving over to the Sigalo article,
Okay.
we're taken to South Africa, where embroidery becomes this incredibly powerful way of expressing the traumas of apartheid, which are often so difficult to talk about.
Yeah, this article introduced me to the concept of hidden transcripts,
Right.
where groups who are marginalized use coded language to express their experiences without directly challenging those in power.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, the women in South Africa used embroidery as their hidden transcript.
Yeah.
They were literally stitching their stories into existence.
It's amazing. Think of these embroideries as like visual narratives woven together with these intricate patterns and vibrant colors.
Right.
They weren't just pretty pictures. They were filled with symbols and metaphors that communicated all the complexities of life under apartheid, the pain, the resilience, even hope.
Right. And it's amazing how something as simple as embroidery can become a form of resistance.
Yeah.
A way to make sure that their stories, their history wasn't erased.
For sure.
Did the Sigalo article mention any specific examples of the symbolism used in the embroideries?
Yeah, one that really stood out was the use of barbed wire.
Oh, wow.
On the surface, it represents the physical barriers and restrictions of apartheid.
Right.
But on a deeper level, it symbolizes the emotional and psychological scars left by segregation and oppression.
Wow, that's heavy.
Yeah.
It's incredible how something so visually simple can carry so much meaning.
Right.
And I imagine sharing these embroideries with others, maybe even cross generations, help to create this sense of shared experience and understanding.
Absolutely. These pieces weren't meant to be hidden away. They were created to be seen, shared, and talked about to spark conversations and foster empathy. They really show the power of textiles to connect personal and collective experiences and ultimately contribute to a shared process of healing.
This is already so thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Like seeing textiles in a whole new light. It's like they're not just objects anymore. They're these vessels for emotions, memories, and even history.
That's a great way to put it, and it makes me wonder if we look beyond individual experiences, how else are textiles used to express and process these larger societal traumas?
That's a great question, and it leads us perfectly into the next part of our deep dive,
Okay.
where we'll explore how textiles, particularly in art, can be used to reflect and even challenge social and political traumas.
Sounds good.
So welcome back as we continue to explore this connection between textiles and trauma.
Yeah.
And I think now would be a good time to shift our focus a bit to how textiles are used in art, to reflect social and political upheaval.
It's really something else how textiles, being so accessible and tactile, can make these often kind of abstract concepts of trauma more tangible and visible, right?
Right. It's like they give these experiences a form that we can actually see and touch and connect with on a deeper level.
Exactly. And the Otabasi article we talked about earlier mentions this, but it doesn't really go into specific examples.
That's true.
But the Sigalo article about South African embroidery really illustrates this well.
Yeah, you're right that South African embroidery really shows how textiles can be used to process like collective trauma. And the article even says that these embroidered pieces became a form of social commentary.
Oh, yeah.
Documenting all of the struggles and injustices that Black South Africans faced during apartheid.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about documenting the hardships. It was also about expressing resilience, hope, and resistance. The women who created these pieces, they used bright colors and really intricate patterns to tell their stories.
Right.
And they would often include symbolism that held deeper meaning.
I remember the article mentioning the use of specific colors like red, green, and black.
Yes.
Did it say anything about the significance of those colors?
Yes. The Sigalo article explains that those colors were actually taken from the African National Congress flag.
Wow.
Representing the fight for liberation and the hope for a better future.
So even the choice of colors was a kind of subtle protest.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating how something as simple as a color can hold so much political weight.
Right.
It just shows how much thought and meaning went into every element of these textiles.
Yeah, for sure.
Did the article mention any other examples of symbolism used in these embroideries?
Absolutely. One really striking example is the depiction of birds in flight.
Oh, interesting.
So on one level, birds represent freedom,
Right.
and the ability to rise above hardship.
Yeah.
But in the context of apartheid, they also symbolize this yearning for freedom of movement, the right to travel and live without restrictions.
So it's like these women were stitching their dreams and hopes into these pieces.
Exactly.
Creating something tangible that represented the future they longed for.
Yeah, and by sharing these pieces in their communities and even internationally,
Right.
they were able to raise awareness about the injustices of apartheid and connect with people who shared similar experiences.
It's incredible how something as personal and intimate as embroidery could become such a powerful tool for social change.
Yeah.
I'm really starting to understand how textiles can become these powerful symbols of shared experiences, giving a voice to those who have been silenced or marginalized.
And it's not just limited to embroidery.
Right.
Throughout history, textiles have been used in a lot of different art forms to address social and political issues.
That's true.
Think about things like protest banners or quilts that commemorate historical events, or even clothes with political slogans on them.
It's like these textiles become physical reminders of shared struggles and aspirations,
Right.
allowing people to connect and communicate and even inspire action.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really important question. How can we use the power of textiles to create spaces for healing and dialogue around trauma?
Right.
Not just trauma from the past, but the traumas that we're facing right now.
That's a great question. And it seems like we need to start by recognizing the power of textiles to tell stories and connect with us emotionally.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's about encouraging more textile-based art projects that tackle contemporary social issues, or even incorporating these practices into therapeutic settings.
Those are some excellent ideas.
Thanks.
It's all about integrating them into mainstream healthcare so that they become a more recognized and accepted part of trauma recovery.
Right. It makes me think of those community knitting groups and sewing circles.
Oh, yeah.
What if we had more of those?
Right.
It doesn't even have to be formal therapy.
Right.
Just having places where people feel comfortable expressing themselves creatively and connecting with each other.
Exactly.
That could be so therapeutic.
And think about the potential for using technology. What if we used virtual reality to create immersive textile experiences for therapy?
Wow.
Imagine a virtual space where you can work with different fabrics, create designs, and even feel the textures.
That's amazing.
All in a safe and controlled environment.
That could be a game changer for people who can't access physical materials.
Yeah.
Or who have a hard time with in-person settings.
Absolutely.
it can make these practices accessible to so many more people.
Exactly. And this leads us to another important area of research.
Okay.
We need more studies to really understand the how and why of textile-based practices and how they actually promote healing.
Right.
What's happening in the brain? What are the psychological benefits? This research could help us refine these practices, make them even more effective, and really advocate for their widespread use.
Yeah, the research could really give textile therapy more legitimacy.
For sure.
But it's not just about individual healing, is it?
Right.
We've seen how textiles can be powerful tools for social change.
Yeah.
So how do we use that power in meaningful ways going forward?
Well, we need to support the artists and creators who are using textiles to address social issues and trauma. Give them platforms to share their work and amplify their voices.
Right.
Encourage museums and galleries to exhibit textile art that tackles these difficult subjects. Make those narratives more visible and accessible.
It's about bringing those conversations into the open.
Exactly.
What about including textile-based projects in education?
Oh, that's interesting.
Have students create their own pieces of textile art that reflect their understanding of current social issues or even historical events.
That would be powerful.
Yeah.
It could help foster empathy and critical thinking and a deeper appreciation for how art can shape our understanding of the world.
It seems like there's so much potential here.
There really is.
What do you think is the most important takeaway from all of this?
That's a good question.
Where do we go from here?
I think the key is to understand that textiles, trauma, and community are all deeply interconnected. They're not separate things. They influence and shape each other.
Yep.
And we need to harness the power of textiles to create a more just, compassionate, and resilient world. A world where trauma is acknowledged and healing is supported.
I love that vision textiles as agents of positive change.
Yeah.
And as we start to wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a thought that we talked about earlier.
Okay.
The traumas that are embedded in the textiles themselves.
Right.
All of the exploitation, the environmental damage, the human cost, often hidden in the clothes we wear.
That's so important.
It's about being mindful consumers,
Yes.
being aware of the stories that our clothes tell.
Right.
Both the beautiful ones and the painful ones.
Absolutely.
It's about recognizing just how complex our relationship with textiles really is.
Yeah.
But by understanding these complexities and really engaging with them thoughtfully, I think we can unlock the true potential of textiles as agents of healing social change and a more sustainable future.
I agree completely.
Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into textiles and trauma.
Yeah.
We've covered so much, from using textiles for personal healing to seeing them as powerful social commentary and art. And now I'm really curious to explore, what are the implications of all of this?
Yeah.
What does this mean for the future of textiles and how we understand and deal with trauma?
Well, it's a really important question, right?
Yeah.
We've seen that textiles can be really powerful tools for healing, but how do we make these practices more accessible and available to everyone?
Right. It shouldn't be something that's just for a select few.
Exactly.
So what are some ways that we can make that happen? Should we be integrating textile-based therapy into, existing mental health programs?
That's a great place to start.
Yeah.
We could offer workshops or provide materials. We could even train therapists in these techniques.
Yeah.
It's about making these practices a normal part of healthcare.
Right, so that they become a more recognized and accepted part of trauma recovery.
Exactly.
It makes me think about those community knitting groups and sewing circles we were talking about.
Yeah.
What if we encouraged more of those?
Right.
It wouldn't even have to be formal therapy. Just creating spaces where people feel comfortable expressing themselves and connecting with others through textiles.
Right.
That could be incredibly healing in itself.
Absolutely. And think about the possibilities with technology.
Yeah.
What if we used virtual reality to create immersive textile experiences for therapeutic purposes?
Okay.
Imagine a virtual space where you could manipulate fabrics and design things and even feel the textures.
Wow.
All in a safe environment.
Yeah, that's mind-blowing.
Right.
And it could really be a game changer for people who don't have access to physical materials or maybe find in-person settings difficult.
Exactly. It would really open up these practices to a lot more people.
Yeah. Democratize it in a way.
Right. And this brings us to another important area research. We really need more studies to understand exactly how and why these textile-based practices work for healing.
Yeah, like what's actually happening in the brain?
Right.
What are the psychological benefits?
Exactly. And this research could help us make these practices even better, more effective, and really advocate for them to be used more widely.
The research could give textile therapy more credibility.
Oh, sure.
But, it's not just about individual healing.
Right.
We've seen how powerful textiles can be for social change. So how do we harness that power and keep moving forward?
Well, we need to support the artists and creators who are using textiles to address social issues and trauma.
Yeah, give them a platform.
Exactly. We need to give them platforms to share their work and amplify their voices. And we need to encourage museums and galleries to show textile art that tackles these tough issues.
Right, make it visible.
Yeah, make those stories more visible and accessible.
And bring those conversations to the forefront.
Exactly.
What about bringing textile-based projects into education?
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, like imagine students creating their own textile art pieces that reflect their understanding of social issues or historical events.
That would be amazing. It could foster empathy and critical thinking.
Yeah.
And really help students appreciate how art can shape our view of the world.
There's just so much potential.
There really is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what do you think is like the biggest takeaway from all of this?
I think the most important thing is realizing that textiles, trauma, and community are all connected.
Okay.
They all influence each other. And we need to use the power of textiles to build a more just and compassionate world.
Yeah.
A world that's more resilient and where trauma is acknowledged and healing is supported.
I love that Vision Textiles as agents of positive change.
Right.
And, as we finish up here,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
The traumas that are actually part of the textiles themselves.
Yeah.
All the exploitation, the environmental damage, the human cost that's often hidden in the clothes we buy.
Right. We have to remember that.
It's about being more conscious as consumers.
Yeah.
Thinking about the stories behind our clothes, both the good and the bad.
Absolutely.
It's about recognizing that our relationship with textiles is complicated. But I think if we understand these complexities and really engage with them,
Yeah.
we can unlock the true potential of textiles to heal, to drive social change, and to create a more sustainable future.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So that's it for our deep dive into textiles and trauma. I
Yeah.
hope you've gained some new perspectives.
Definitely.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep weaving your own stories into the fabric of the world.
Thanks for joining us.